Welcome, everyone. I'm super juiced and honored to have John Jennings with us here today for the Oakland Creates Art Makers series. I'm going to share my screen and have him introduce himself and talk a little bit about what he does. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see the slides here?
Yeah, well, I can see it says you started sharing your screen. I think it's still loading. Oh, there we go. All
All
right.
right, perfect. So just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. My name is John Jennings, and I am a media and cultural studies professor at the University of California at Riverside. I've been in that position for about a decade or so. A lot of my work is intersecting with what someone would call the Afro-speculative. So basically, Black perspective or Afrocentric perspectives on like science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism. I'm probably one of the predominant scholars in Afrofuturism in the country, give or take, believe it or not, you know. And I do like a lot of work on horror. And in fact, right now I'm teaching a course on Afrofuturism and the visual culture of horror. I teach an intro class on Afrofuturism and visual culture, and I also teach a course just on comics and contemporary culture. Yeah, and very specifically, I teach courses on, say, like, Afrofuturism and Black superheroes in politics. So, my work, uh, delves into a lot of different areas around representation. My background is in graphic design. I taught like design history and design methodology for many years before I switched over to media analysis. Um, basically, it's for my own work. One of my claims to fame is, along with my friend Damian Duffy, we have adapted three of Octavia Butler's science fiction stories into graphic novels. The first was Kindred, the second was Parable of the Sower, and now we just finished Parable of the Talents, which just came out in April. I also created a Black superhero for Marvel called Ghostlight, last year. And I'm a curator, I'm a publisher. I actually run a whole line of graphic novels called Megascope, which are long form graphic novels centered around people of color and speculation. So that's kind of like an overview. There's a lot of other stuff, but that's me in a nutshell.
Cool, cool. And if people are interested, they could screenshot the bio here. Let's talk a little bit about your collaboration. That was one of my first things that I wanted to ask you about because I do know that you've been doing graphic novel versions of Octavia Butler's books. But talk a little bit about how you work with another person and how that collaboration actually works. Like, I know he does the hand lettering, right? And he does the editing, or explain in your own words how
Well,
that
well,
collaboration.
so actually, with when we work on these particular books, Damien actually adapts the work. Like he actually goes through the script. He goes through the novel and turns it into a graphic novel script. So he's actually doing the
Right.
heavy lifting of adapting,
Okay.
the novel into another form. As you stated, he's also our letterer, which is really fortunate because he can actually edit as he goes along, that kind of stuff. I'm the illustrator and colorist, and sometimes probably art director. It depends on the level of what's going on with the story, what have you. But it's really like kind of a great one-two punch with us working together. I've been collaborating with Damien for like 20 years now. It's kind of
Wow.
crazy, but
Okay.
we met at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign years ago. And we just kind of hit it off. He actually crashed a dinner with Scott McCloud. And because I brought Scott McCloud to class, I mean, and to campus. And so he was like, it was almost like a triple crash. Like, Scott McCloud's friend, or RC Harvey, he was my friend. Um, Daniel Yesbick, who was Damien's teacher, crashed, who was friends with RC Harvey. And then Damien. So it's like these three extra people got added to dinner, and he was one of them. And we just kind of hit it off over dinner. It was pretty fun. And
That's
ever since then, we've been working together. So I think one of the things about like collaboration is you have to actually like put your ego to the side. I think if you're used to like being the only creator on something, that's different. But if you're sharing your vision with someone that you respect, it really behooves you to actually like check your ego, be respectful, think, and actually really take into consideration what the needs are for your collaborator, but also most of all, make sure you understand the needs of this project. Because one
right.
of the things why these books work is because our third collaborator is Octavia E. Butler.
Mm-hmm.
So her voice is the paramount voice. So everything that we do is in service of that voice. And so as long as you keep that particular mentality, I think you're probably going to get a winner, you know?
Right. I was going to ask you about that, how the books are translated from a long format novel to graphic novels and sort of how you entwine your work because I know she uses a lot of um, what's the term? I think it's circular narratives. And
Hmm.
so for readers who are used to reading graphic novels that have a linear storyline, how is that interpreted or does he stay with that same format? Uh,
No, you can't. I think the thing is like, because you're right, like it wouldn't necessarily translate as well to this medium. You know, one of the things about doing adaptations from prose to like other media is to understand the affordances of both mediums, you know.
mm,
And some of the things that pros can do, comics don't do well, and vice versa. So one of the first things that Damien does is he untangles it. He kind of like he has to make it into a linear narrative. And
okay.
so that means reading the text like at least I think he read Kindred like more than 14 or 15 times, you
Wow.
know.
I can
Just to
honestly believe
yeah,
that. Just reading it barely once,
yeah,
I have to pick, I know I want to pick it up again
yeah.
because it's one of those almost poetic, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very lean. It feels like a play to me, actually. You know, the way it's written and the way it kind of presents itself as a graphic novel, it feels very much like a performance, like a play, you know.
And
But yeah, yeah,
there's a lot of space for our imagination, which I love.
right. Right, right. I appreciate it. And but yeah, I really value collaborations. I do a lot of collaborating, actually.
So these next two, can you talk a little bit about your choices for the cover art? Because I really enjoy just not only the textures that you're using when you're not only coloring but sketching and have the layers underneath, but
Hmm.
just like I was saying, it breathes in a certain way and it the interplay, and I hate to use that word, but I hate to use juxtaposition.
Disposition is such an art school word,
Oh my
right?
goodness. But
But
it
they, I mean, but it,
truly,
but if you're gonna use it, this is the project to do it with, you know, because these covers were inspired by Boxers and Saints, you know, by I think it's Gene Ewan Yang, I believe. Ewing, like, you know, so basically the cover makes you know, when you put them you know together, they make the entire face of Lauren Olamina, you know. Yeah, so we do is like, you know, so when we drew it, you know, I drew it as one continuous image, and we already had the idea that it was going to split up into two, you know, because it's a duology that she didn't get a chance to finish the trilogy. It was actually maybe going to be longer than that, but she passed away before she could finish it. So, you know, the two books actually like cover Lauren Olamina's journey as the creator of this religion called Earthseed, you know, and basically we track her from like being age 15 all the way to like 80, which is like around the time of her death, you know, this character. And so that was pretty powerful. So Parable of the Sower is the first of the two. And so there's a lot of tumult and like and things that happen in her life. Like she loses everything essentially, has to go on the road and starts picking up people and starts kind of preaching to them to a certain degree and kind of molding them into followers. And before you know it, you know, she's created like a commune and this kind of thing. And it's like you know, a safe space for people like her, you know, that kind of thing. Lauren Lamina has the ability to feel others' emotions, particularly pain and pleasure. You know, she's what they call a sharer. Hyper empathy syndrome is what they call it. And it's a psychosomatic disease or like disability
hmm,
that is related to um, a drug, an experimental drug that was created to give like more capacity to human beings and stuff.
wow.
So her mom takes it and she ends up getting this kind of like you know, birth defect or like this disability through her mom, you know, so that's which is kind of interesting. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so what happens is like Lauren Olamina, when she looks at someone who's in pain or something, her brain makes her feel that pain, you know. So
Well,
yeah.
that's very well translated in the artwork, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Just your choices of color palette too, kind of
Yes.
makes it really obvious. Almost
Right.
like and this just came to me just now. In
Mhm.
Sinners, where one twin has the red,
Yep.
clothing, and the other twin has the blue
As the
clothing.
blue. Yeah. You know, so with the first one, you know, there's a fire in the first one. And so we use red as a denotation of like the sharing ability, you know,
Mhm, okay.
based off of our childhood. So like these hot reds and oranges and stuff. The second part actually is told through the eyes of her uh, estranged daughter, Asher, and also known as Larkin, and it's set way in the future. Actually, I want to say like many years after the death of Lauren Olamina, actually. She dies around 80 um, or so. And the whole thing is like she wants to populate the stars, and actually further mankind's life into the galaxy, that kind of stuff. So it's interesting because this particular story, Parable of Talents, is actually like it's actually like told through us through a remediation technique. It's almost like a very meta kind of thing where like the Asher character is actually telling her mother's story, who is passed on actually. Like by the time we get to this story in this particular book, it's many years in the future. Um,
And it's
and
I'm
Lana,
sorry to interrupt you. It's
yeah.
interesting because now I'm kind of feeling, and I don't know if you discovered this or thought of this, but I'm thinking this right now in the moment. It almost seems like a parallel to I'm gonna say either Song of Solomon or
Hmm.
Sula.
They can have that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah,
that's
yeah.
really like this whole idea around not only just traveling physically, but like you said, the emotional travel, the journey that you're going on, especially if
Yeah.
you're empathetic or over empathetic, where you're taking on the feelings or nature of someone else. And now you make me. I haven't read Parable of the Talents, but now I want to read it and then also read Sula again and
Yeah.
read because yeah, it just makes me think that they have to be somehow connected. They're
The heavy
contemporaries. Are they contemporaries? I think Toni Morrison was just a little bit before Octavia Butler, right?
right. Right.
But I feel like there's definitely some connection there.
Yeah, yeah. And as far as like the blue on Parable of Talents, is because the entire story is told through like these computer programs.
Hmm.
So blue represents like technology and coldness and like hopefully quote unquote objectivity, you know what I'm saying?
Well, it looks like a computer motherboard in the background. So,
Right. And so it's like computer motherboard slash like system, like plant systems. That's what we're kind of trying to go for.
well, don't
Um,
spoil it for me because I need to read it now.
yeah, yeah, it's a heavy lift, but
Nice.
it's even longer than the first book, which is crazy. So
No. So let's talk a
yeah,
little bit about. I talked to Stacey Robinson about Black Kirby and what
yeah.
that means to him. Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with Stacey
Yeah,
Robinson?
Black Kirby started about 12 years ago. We met actually at a convention called, well, we actually had been online. We kind of like started like interacting online through like some other like spaces back in the, man, it had to be like the, oh man, it had to be like the early 2000s maybe. This place called Hero Talk. It was like the Black Superhero Museum, that Omar Bilal, not is it Omar Bilal, Omar Bilal started. And this place called Hero Talk would have a bunch of us would be on like sharing information. We would post drawings of things, that kind of stuff. And Stacy was part of a collective of artists out of I think it was North Carolina, and they were called Trimeca Studios. So it's him, Charlie Go Bill, and Jim Michael Franklin. All of them had different styles, and they were kind of like they were the only one that actually to me at the time was like kind of a working studio.
Hmm.
And so me and Damian Duffy actually ended up doing like some curatorial work around Black comics. And yeah, we reached out to Stacy and his compadre. Stacy didn't send us any work. And the book came out that we were putting together, and he's like, where's my artwork at? He said, well, you didn't give us permission to do it. So that's how we kind of hit it off. He was like, well, since then, he was like, all right, this dude is very serious. I'm gonna send my work. Anyway, so we started like talking at this convention down in Atlanta and realized we had a lot of stuff in common. So we just kept in touch. And
Yeah.
then what happened was became really good friends. And we came up with this idea called Black Kirby because this is around the time that the first Avengers movie came out. And
Yeah.
Disney made like over $1 billion with that first movie. And, at the same time, Jack Kirby's family, who Jack Kirby, as you may or may not know, was like he co-created like the Marvel Universe essentially, like Captain America, the X-Men, the Hulk, stuff like that. And but the family was trying to sue Disney for some type of remuneration, even though it was work for hire. It was like, yo, you just made $1 billion. You can't break us off something,
Right.
right? And so we were like, man, this is crazy. They treating that dude like he black. And then somebody, one of us, we don't even remember, said, "Yeah, man, we should call him. His name should be Black Kirby."
Wow.
And they were like, "Well, wait a minute, that's actually an interesting idea." So we actually started making work as this singular entity called Black Kirby, who
Nice.
lives in another space where like Jack Kirby was a black man and actually connected to his roots and like was doing like, you know, powerful, like subversive, like pop culture artwork, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. So this
That-
is kind of, and honestly, what that is like it's heavily borrowing from Saidiya Hartman's work and critical fabulation, where she kind of posits that you can actually create change through understanding the archive and remixing the archive through narrative, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that when you guys collaborate, the imagery sort of expands on itself. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about a project that we worked on together, but really I feel like Stacy's hand was so heavily involved in sort of the uh not only just the impact, but just like that first, that first impression you get when you're picking up a
Yeah.
book and you're like, okay, what is this? Talk a little bit about why you chose to use his collage instead of his drawings for the covers and other art.
Well, we wanted to have like a really honestly we were paying homage to like early Vertigo comics, you know. We were looking at like the Sandman covers from like from DC Vertigo. And those and Dave McKean, like Stacy could do both. Like Dave McKean did like illustration work, he did photography work, he was a musician, that kind of stuff. Kind of a virtuoso. And so we thought it would be great to actually like mimic that feel, with these Afrocentric collages. And Stacy kind of leaned into it, really did a great job, I feel.
Yeah, I'm discovering new things every time I look at his collage. I'm just now realizing that's a slave ship
Hmm.
cargo hold in the background. I think that's cotton too. So
That's right. Cotton in between the water. I mean, it's just like a lot of things happening, you know. It's a beautiful cover though.
it's amazing. And so talk a little bit about the character you chose for Box of Bones. You wrote that in conjunction with Aizi Jama Everett. Uh,
Yeah. So I met Ayize through a mutual friend at her home and her and her husband's home in Berkeley, and Lee Rayford and Michael Cohen and their family. And so Yeezy was there. We hit it off, and over a period of time, it was like, man, we should work on something together, right? And so I had some ideas percolating. This book was at first it was called Shadow Box actually, and
hmm,
yeah, and after a while, we decided like, hey, let's do a like kind of a shout out to like Henry Dumas's Ark of Bones. Was a
nice.
short story by actually he kind of inspired like Toni Morrison a little bit actually, as a surrealist writer. Was killed tragically by off-duty transit cop. It just sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
So we started thinking about like, well, who is our main character, and I was like, you know what, you really don't see a lot of like secret characters who are like black women, and you definitely don't see secret characters, that are black queer women, from the
Mhm.
South. So we were like, you know what? Lindsay Ford is a black queer woman from the South who is working on a PhD, at Berkeley actually, and
Ironically.
she's studying folklore. So it's her background, so she's like African American studies and like folklore, that kind of stuff, right? Because she's been obsessed with this box that her grandfather told her about. He was a bluesman, blind blues man. And we kind of allude to the fact that she's from down south. We don't necessarily say which part of the South. It's like the South as an idea.
Right. Yeah,
And
for
so,
sure.
yeah, so what's interesting about it is that most of the stories are taking place through interviews and like secondhand information because she's in the field doing her field work and actually getting ready to probably write her dissertation and stuff like that, right? And over a period of time, she's talking to her partner Hatima. They're very much in love. Hatima is really supportive, but she also is like, hey, she keeps her in line, like, hey, you need to check in, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
And you try to see like as she starts interacting with this box that she has some type of like spiritual connected connection to it that she doesn't understand. And so little by little, the box becomes like this antagonist, the secondary like antagonist character, and it kind of spirals into like the box actually becomes like central, and then the conflict between Lindsay and the box becomes like way more apparent and raw by the end of it. So
No,
Just
it's an amazing arc. I was just saying the storyline is just an amazing arc.
thank you. Yeah,
Um,
I really enjoyed the way it turned out. It's a label. I was just talking to a user today. We need to do more, do more with it. Because we actually have together with you and other collaborators created like a really big like story world,
yeah.
It is like 300 page, collection of work, and scholarship, over the last like, decade or so,
No, it really made me think I was watching Lovecraft Country all over again, the series, and
Yep.
it really kind of has that same heavy vibe, but at the same time, this kind of light, playful, almost Indiana Jones kind of feeling to
Yep,
it.
because she's a secret character like Indiana Jones. Exactly. Right. Or like H.P. Lovecraft characters, or like, Kolchak the Night Stalker, or like Fox Mulder.
Yeah,
Love all those characters, but they're all, white cishet men,
yeah.
You
No,
really don't see like a character like Lindsay a lot.
and that's yeah, that's what I really love. And like you said, I'd love to see something, yeah, something more done. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's
we will.
cool because it's exciting. And then I really wanted to talk a little bit about the technique that you're using for just the actual practical comic book makings. Like this is a
Yeah.
lovely cover, but also your design choices. And I
Mhm.
wish I had a better photo of this on the right, where
Yeah.
you're putting the boxes, but then you have this dynamic sort of 3D um, art coming from the background that kind of also tells another story that kind of
That's right.
fuels what's happening in the boxes. Can
Yeah.
you talk a
So
little about?
what we're doing is, so Nettie Okorafor wrote this story called On the Road like ages ago, and I'm really good friends with Nettie, and I love the story because it reminds me so much of her turmoil. I knew that the main character was her. This
Mm,
is before like she actually really got her writing style together, so you can definitely see like there's some things that should have been, dealt with editorially, stuff like that. But it's a raw representation of the author that she was going to become. And I really love it, and it's like, man, this is you. I was like, can I make a graphic novel out of it? She said, sure, because she has the rights to it. And so I started doing test pages. I actually did this entire thing. I mean, so I actually adapted it, from the short story into a graphic novel. And I started going through it and actually saying, like, okay, what's the best way to do this? It's about a young lady who's a detective from Chicago. She goes home to Nigeria, and the freak rainstorm like stirs up these spirits. She's staying with her grandmother and her great aunt. And what happens is like the spirits come, and then she gets touched by this boy who has this crazy head wound. Shouldn't be
mm,
alive actually. And he touches her, and in doing so actually like starts a chain of events that haunts her. So yeah, that's what we are with it. But the whole thing is about tradition, about being stuck between traditions, about what is magic, what is real, that kind of stuff.
wow.
And then how do you actually face your ancestral gifts and utilize them for good? That's what this is to me.
Wow. I just thought it was so unique to see. I think I've only seen one other person put the emphasis outside of the boxes.
Well, what it was is that you're looking at the merging of like the actual world, like so the panels are like our world, right? And the
Mm,
gutters, the space under it, that's the spirit world.
wow. Okay.
And so what's happening is like little by little, the spirit world is encroaching upon the real world. And so you have all this tension and stuff that's happening where she's like, stuff that we can see that she can't, that kind of thing.
That's dope.
There's a lot of stuff happening in those gutters, and then as she gets closer to like resolution, not only does her hair like get all tight, she actually gets like a little cleaner, and all the lines kind of
Mhm.
go away, and then the gutters get really, really clean.
Wow.
But she's dealing with something that she's buried inside of her, and she's cutting off her own blessings. So the
Wow.
ancestors are gonna help her out. So it looks like, so what happens is like it seems. It's a story of awakening and actually accepting your own gifts, but also accepting the fact that those gifts can also be painful if you don't necessarily deal with that trauma. So she bears this trauma that actually like totally poisons or makes her gift toxic, and that has to be exercised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, I like that interesting dynamic too, and it made me think of the when the hands are touching her shoulders.
Yes.
Head
Yeah.
wound makes me think of this scene. I don't know if you, well, you're a horror buff like me, in Pet Cemetery, where the
Mhm.
guy comes in the emergency with the
Yep.
head wound when he's first a doctor, right? And then
Yep.
he comes back to him in the dream later, and he
Hmm.
can tell him what's gonna happen if he buries the kid.
Yeah.
It came gave me a call to that. It made me recall that scene.
Yeah, I could see that.
Let's see. So talk a little bit more, like again, about your own work. I really like I said, just the movement and I guess the mark making, because you know my work, I'm excessively
Yeah,
into
you like to do
cross
a lot of, yeah, the line is beautiful. Yeah, so I'm really influenced by printmaking, you know.
Okay.
Final cut, like my, some of my favorite work out of the Harlem is out of the Harlem Renaissance, but I'm also looking at like the, German Expressionist period. I'm really influenced by people who are printmakers and expressionists. Folk like Otto Dix or like Egon Schiele, you know.
I
Uh,
could see that. I could see that. Yeah, the
yeah.
relief part of it.
Very, very color friendly. Also, people like Kathy Kollwitz is actually in there too, But also like Palmer Hayden and like Lois Mailou Jones and
Yeah, because
Chuck.
you're flipping the reverse what normally you would see in printmaking as the positive part of the
Right.
stone or the screen is the color part.
Exactly. So I'm always trying to. So people think like, oh, this is printmaking. Sometimes like, nope, it's not a print. It's actually like me thinking like a print, like a printer. It's all about representation. Like you said, reversing out. If you want a black, that means you leave it. If you want, that kind of stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful work, John.
Thank you.
And then I saw recently Lion Man. Talk a little bit about this. Is this a part of your new imprint?
Well, no, it's actually like a project we did with Bill Campbell. Bill Campbell owns this company called Rosarian Publishing out of the
Ah,
East Coast.
okay.
So during COVID, I was approached by Dr. Michael Norton Dando and actually like David Brame to work on this thing. Well, I've always been messing around with like public domain characters. It relaxes me. Lion Man was the character was created in like 1947 by Orrin C. Evans and his folk, and it was the first like collection of like black stories, like
Oh, mm.
multi, as comics, like multi-genre comics. The second one never happened due to racism, just to be point blank about it, and
Mm.
yeah, and so what happens is the characters, all the characters in those books fell in that one book fell into the public domain. So what I started to do is like create different versions of Iron Man. I mean Lion Man, and,
Oh, nice.
I don't know, it just kind of caught on, and before you know it, we created a story. It was funded by the United Way in Minnesota, and it was used for this thing called the Lion Man Literacy Project.
Oh, Minnesota.
Yeah, yes, that's where Dando teaches at St. Cloud State. So
You
that's
know
why.
the Vikings, that's my team. Yay. They just turned down a bunch of money from Elon Musk.
Oh, well, good for them.
I love them for that.
So, yeah, me too. So, what ends up happening is we get this opportunity to do this project, and then I was working, and this the next image, kind of deals with that. We'll go back to Lineman 2 too, but I ended up sitting on a committee for this Afrofuturist period room at the Met in New York. And so this is the cover for a short story comic that I did. So basically, I wrote and illustrated the first comic published by the Met. So
Wow.
only like 9 pages, but
Those
So then what
color
happens
choices.
is we do the period room with Hannah Beekler, who was set designer for the Black Panther, I think won an Oscar for it. And she's, 'cause even like when I was sitting in this committee, like we were on Zoom, and like Ryan Coogler was right there, and in that as well. So we they actually wanted copies of it to put into the Afrofuturist period room. So the period room is it's not necessarily permanent, but it's there for an extended stay. Yeah.
So how did you get the sort of it almost looks like you use alcohol on acrylics. How did you
Mhm.
achieve that those background the turquoise and the like you can see the little bit of the mauve and the orange, I mean the reds
Right.
underneath the black?
Yeah.
Is that
Um,
traditional or is that digital?
all this is digital. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
I use Procreate. Thank you. I use Procreate to draw on, digitally, and I've gotten pretty good at matching colors, and I had a really good color theory teacher, so it's kind of funny because I hated those classes, and now
Me
like
too.
I'm pretty
Laverne Green was my color theory teacher. She did a lot of what is it? Hans, what is the book? Hans Elder? Is that what's his name?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, you said Hans El, which one?
Is it Hans Elder? It's a I'm gonna say not Norwegian or maybe he's from the
That
Netherlands.
sounds familiar, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. but that's those theories have held up for me really well.
Hmm. No,
But
but
no,
this is a fun project. I mean, both of them. And so, Lion Man kind of caught on, and we ended up doing more versions of it. Me and Damien did this Phantoma image, this Phantoma thing. Before you knew it, we had like a bunch of like public domain images and stuff. So it's like, you know what, let's put this out as a book. So we did a Kickstarter thing, and it made the money, and so now it's coming out. Actually, I think it comes out next week, I think.
oh wow.
Yeah, they're like, yeah,
Really
so
fun.
yep.
Really fun. And I like I said, the backgrounds are stuff that I would do traditionally because I do a lot of traditional like watercolor acrylics. And just to get that relief, you throw like, alcohol, maybe a little
Yeah.
salt on there.
It's a brush. It's just a brush. It mimics it's mimicking like organic texture. I love using that kind of stuff. You can get an atmosphere really fast.
Sure. I'm gonna have to I just started doing digital, so it's
Oh
a
yeah, you
baby
got
step.
yeah, I think you're gonna like it. Yeah.
It's tough it's a steep learning curve. I'll say that.
Yeah. It really, but practice. I would recommend if you have an iPad,
I do.
using the Procreate, because it's Procreate's only like $11 or something like that, and it's really easy to use because it specifically is about drawing.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I've been playing around in Sketchbook on my Surface Pro, but I do have an iPad as well. So I'm gonna dig in. It's just getting over that initial hump of really going all in. Right now, I'm just kind of playing around with the basics.
Yeah, doing a project will make you use it quickly.
Nice. So let's
Uh,
jump into some of these interview questions. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see your lovely face. So the first question is, where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town called Flora, Mississippi. I was born
Mhm.
in Brookhaven, same city that David Banner is from.
Oh wow. Where
Yeah.
in Mississippi is that? Further south?
It's further south. It's closer to like New Orleans.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Brookhaven's about an hour from New Orleans. And then Flora's like central. It's closer to Jackson, where the capital is. So that's where I was raised. It was small farming community. Mostly like soybean and cotton being grown there, exported out. So yeah, but it was an interesting upbringing. So that's where I'm from, small town.
Nice. It's a nice black community there.
I would say yeah, 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 it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know too much about Mississippi. My grandmother was born there, but just sort of in passing, I think it was Vicksburg.
yeah, yeah.
But
Vicksburg,
she,
I've been there many times, actually. One of my favorite cities. Yeah,
yeah, back in
Vicksburg used to be. Hmm?
1908, she was born.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
So I was yeah, Vicksburg's a beautiful city, like
nice.
rolling hills.
So my next question, and I kind of asked all of the other artists that I've interviewed, was there one thing that sort of inspired you as a young artist to think about like, hey, I can do this for a living, or
Mm.
this is what I want to do, period.
I think it was comics. I fell in love with comics. My mom introduced me to comics fairly early. Somewhere around the age of 11 or 12, I started to realize like the same people were doing these comics. Like I could see styles and started recognizing, oh, this is actually the same guy doing this over here.
Nice.
And then I realized like at the bottom at the beginning of the comics, you have this thing called an indicia that actually like lets you, it has the address of the company and everything at the bottom.
Right.
And all that stuff was coming out of New York. So I was like, oh man, I got to go to New York to be an artist. So I actually tell my grandmother, hey, Granny, I want to go to, it's my dream to go to New York and be a comic book artist. And she just laughed. Because she couldn't think of like not having me in her life and that kind of stuff. And it made her really sad. So actually, like, I lied and I said I wouldn't, but I crossed my fingers behind my back.